Hi everyone, Dr. Lakesis here again. So we are going to talk about your first essay, and I know some of you are probably thinking, oh my gosh, how are we already talking about the first essay? And it's coming up, and part of the reason we're talking about it now is that I want to make sure that I'm able to give you comments on your thesis statements sooner rather than later. So for this essay, you are going to write 1,000 words, which is about 3.5 pages, give or take. And I've given you some page requirements here. I'm going to post this on Canvas, so you'll have all of the details that you can look over in your own time. But just to go over them very quickly, should be typed, double space, no extra spacing between paragraphs, because that's annoying and it's filling space. And then Times New Roman 12-point font. It should be with 1-inch margins and what we call left-aligned margins. So if you look here, I know I don't indent the first line where it says prompt, but it should be indented, the first line. And if I scroll up, it is left-aligned because the left side is all the same. It's all flush, right? It all is in line, whereas the right side is not. And where you go to the top of the page, and it's this left one up here. If you click it twice, it's going to give you justified. Don't do that. Just click it once. It should be automatic, but just so you know. And one thing is that your works cited doesn't count towards the word count. It says page count here, but it should be word count. And neither does like your name and title and all that. It's literally just what you wrote. And what you will do is when you write your paper, underneath where you put your name, you'll put the word count so I know what the word count is. And if you don't, then I will double check it, and that will be part of the grade. So that being said, you will need a works cited page because you will need to use citations. Now, works cited means MLA style, not APA. If you don't know the difference or you're used to APA, look it up. I will give you a link. I will also give you a cheat sheet for MLA style 8th edition, not 7th edition. We need to use 8th edition because that's the most current. And if you need extra help, I think the best way for you guys to get extra help is, one, if you're on campus or you're able to get to campus, any of the Seminole State campuses, you can go to the Academic Success Center or the Writing Centers, and they have handouts. They can help you directly. They can look at your papers. And if you're not able to do that, there is a fun little button on our Canvas page. It's called Smart Thinking Tutoring. And if you go on there, you can submit your papers ahead of time and tell them what you want them to look at. I think they give you like 3 options of like the top 3. Now, plan that it's going to take them a little while to look at your stuff. Okay, so I've had other students use it and say it's really helpful. And then I've had some students where they didn't get a response. Don't do that, 2 days before, and then you're freaking out over, oh my gosh, I need this help. So plan it ahead of time if you feel you need to use that. I would recommend it for everybody because even somebody like me who's written a lot of things, I can still always use somebody else to read my stuff. All right, that being said, so your prompt is really focusing on ancient Greece and ancient Rome. I know that by the time you write this paper, we'll have gotten to at least the beginnings of the Renaissance, and definitely dealing with religion, the rise of modern religions, as we call them, and also the Middle Ages. But I didn't want us to get too complicated or make it too difficult. And instead of just letting you write about anything you wanted, which again takes about 5 weeks for you guys to figure out what you want to write about, I'm just giving you a prompt. So the prompt for this paper is very simple. You are going to define the term classical style as related to either ancient Greece or ancient Rome. Both of them have different definitions of classical style. And then your job, so in your introduction, you will give me a very specific definition of what classical style means to either the ancient Greeks or the ancient Romans. And you will say classical style is defined as X. If you say something to the effect of classical style is seen in all of their stuff and we see it everywhere, that's not a definition. That's just telling me where to find it. I need you to define what are the major elements of classical style. If you needed to tell somebody who's never known anything about ancient Greece about their artistic style, how would you define it? What are the major characteristics that you would see in either ancient Greece or ancient Rome? Okay, so that definition goes in your introduction. And then at the end of your introduction, the last sentence of your introduction, you will have a one-sentence thesis that tells me which culture you're looking at and what two specific cultural artifacts, so buildings and or architecture of various kinds, vases, literature, philosophy. It could be what we call engineering works. So when we're talking about ancient Rome, right, it could be the aqueducts, it could be the way that they built road systems and had the aqueducts, plus they started to build like sewers, or some form. It's not exactly a sewer system, but they had some form of cisterns and things like that. So that would be included where it says buildings. It's architecture of any sort. Sculptures included in that, right? When I say etc., it's just because I can't list every single type of cultural artifact. Now, when we talk about cultural artifact, right? Remember that is an artifact of some sort, right? It's a physical thing that gives us information about their culture. So it's usually artistic, right? And it's something, it doesn't have to be a painting or a mosaic or anything visual. It can be literature, it can be philosophy, it can be things like that. For ancient Rome, it can relate to law. But again, if you go more in the philosophical realm, it can be a little difficult to write the paper. So, if it's a more artistic aspect, it's a little easier. But it's whatever you find most interesting. So you'll pick two cultural artifacts, two specific ones, to the one culture you're choosing. So if it's ancient Greece, you're not going to talk about the Pantheon. If it's ancient Rome, you're not going to talk about the Parthenon, right? Make sure you get those two separate. And then your job is to analyze how those cultural artifacts show the classical style of that culture. And let me edit that right now. All right, so I've given you a sample thesis. Use this as a sample template. Please, 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 please use it. Please, please, please. You don't have to steal and copy and paste it because you may want to write about something else, but the basic format should be how you write your thesis. Why? Because we want to set a good foundation for the rest of your paper, and I'm going to have a video of how to organize the rest of your paper and how to outline it and set up your paragraphs that I use for my other online classes. So it's going to talk a little bit more specifically about like the Renaissance or 20th, 21st century, but it's the same concept. It doesn't matter about the topic. It is the same way of organization. So your sample thesis could be something like, the ancient Greeks' classical style is best shown in the Parthenon. So A, artifact number one, because, and you tell me how it's shown, right? And in the Parthenon, because of the emphasis on balance and harmony. Perfect. So I know when you talk about the Parthenon, you're going to have one paragraph that talks about balance and harmony, and one that talks about harmony. And within those paragraphs, you're going to talk very, very specific details. So if you're talking about the Parthenon or a building or something that is a physical structure, you need to give me details of how it was built, what kind of columns were used, what kind of materials were used, what was the design like. If I can't see it when you tell me about it, then you need more specific details. And then the second part of the thesis would be the second cultural artifact. And then you say, and in the sculpture of the discus thrower, because of the emphasis on one, balance of the figure's positioning, and the ideal form of the figure. Is this the best thesis? No, I could clean it up, but it gives you the basic idea. Now, again, you would know, and for those of you who are used to the 5-paragraph structure, you're probably like, oh my gosh, wait. If there's one paragraph on balance, one on harmony related to the Parthenon, and then the discus thrower, there's one on balance of the figure's positioning, which is called contrapposto in the Renaissance. And then there's one on the ideal form. Where's our 5 paragraphs, right? Because we've got 4 body paragraphs. You're allowed to have more than 5 paragraphs, right? Think of each of these points. You could even have 2 for each of these elements that you're talking about because they're very general, right? So these are sections. So the section on balance related to the Parthenon is a section. You could have 2 paragraphs within there if you want. You could have 2 on harmony related to the Parthenon. But in that regard, your essay should be in the same order in which you write it in your thesis. So I'm not going to start writing about the discus thrower first because I've listed the Parthenon first, and I've listed balance in the Parthenon first. I'm not going to talk about harmony first. Now, if you realize that you are writing your paper and you've written it out of order, just change your thesis. It's fine. It's not written in stone. And even if it was written in stone, right, we can break the stone tablet. So we can fix these things. We can edit as needed. All right, moving forward in your analysis, these are just some points to consider, or that not to consider, but that you should really be doing is in your analysis, you should specifically describe the cultural artifact that you're analyzing. You need to break down the formal elements, right? I've already talked about this, particularly to architecture, but if it was a sculpture, right, you should talk about not just saying, oh yeah, the position of the figure is balanced, but how are they doing this? And when they do the ideal form, describe that in detail. What does that mean? And then you explain how those formal elements show the classical style. And you do this, and I'm going to add this, at the end of each paragraph. Okay? So at the end of each paragraph, you're going to connect it back to your thesis. You're going to say, you know, blah, blah, blah. The Parthenon shows the emphasis on balance because it does X, it does Y. And then at the end of the paragraph, you would say the Parthenon's emphasis on balance clearly shows the ancient Greeks' classical style, which focused on A and B, which you already got from your definition, right? And you do that because it tells the reader why all of your description matters. Why does this matter? Why should I care? Because this shows this thing, which is really important. Okay, you don't have to say which is really important, but there you go. I put this warning, you can't choose any piece I've done a presentation about. I'm going to say that for this one, I'm going to take this out. This is a warning from my previous class. I'm going to say you can do things on the Parthenon and the Pantheon and things I've posted videos about because I want to see you connect the dots a little bit more. That was a warning for my other classes where there's a lot more options with some of the topics they're talking about. So the next part is research. So you need to do a little itty bitty research. You need to find 2 scholarly sources. I suggest one on so in this example I give you, one on each of the cultural artifacts. So don't find general things about balance in ancient Greek culture. No, find one on the Parthenon, find one on the discus thrower, right? And then you can use what they say to help your analysis. I get it. You're not experts at the analysis part. That's totally fine. I want to see effort, but you can use your resources to help you with that. Your scholarly sources, you cannot use Wikipedia, any websites. You're not allowed any websites. Your textbook does not count as a source, nor do encyclopedias. You are allowed to use your textbook, but it doesn't count towards the 2 sources. And here's the thing. Can you use Wikipedia or encyclopedias to get some ideas to get started? Absolutely. Just don't cite them. Okay. You are not allowed any websites. You can use the Essasy library databases, which I'm going to post a video about how to get there. Printed books, ebooks, scholarly journals. You can go on Google Scholar, but you may not have access to everything, FYI. Last things where I have about a minute and a half left is you will get a rubric that shows how I'm going to grade you, just like I have for the discussion posts. Content and analysis are the most important part. And so for those of you who don't write very well or like, oh my God, I'm terrible at grammar, I have 2 sections on grammar 2 or 3 in the rubric. And so it's not a huge part of the grade, but if I can't understand what you're writing, then that's a problem, right? So work on clarity. If you're not sure, get extra help, edit and edit and edit again. Make sure you give yourself enough time. When it comes to the research, it's going to take you about 2 to 3 times as long as you think to find the sources that you want. So plan ahead. If you are like, I only have an hour to do research, know that if you're going to actually find what you want, it's probably going to take about 3 hours. Okay. And it just is practice. It's a skill like anything else. Research is the same type of skill as writing. We don't like to do it because we're bad at it, but the more you do it, the better you get at it. Okay. And the more you're like, it's just research. It's no big deal. Final thought, or final point is all essays will be submitted to turnitin.com to check for plagiarism. If there are plagiarized passages, you will receive a 0. All right. If you have any questions, let me know, and I will talk to you guys soon. All right. Bye.